Can you imagine standing in like a field of grass in your wheat and then like eating a piece of bread? Like that's so awesome to this city girl.
Michelle has maintained a love for cooking since she was little. So after she moved to Granite Falls about 7 years ago, whenever she got a craving for a particular dish that wasn't readily available, she found herself in the kitchen whipping up meals from scratch. Getting into baking though, that was more of a slow boil.
With cooking, it's a dash of this here and a little sprinkle of that there, and you taste along the way. But when you start a loaf of bread, you know, you're not just gonna eat your starter, and you're probably not just gonna have a spoonful of flour. So I was just kind of anti-baking a lot, and like, oh, if you use an extra teaspoon of this, you could ruin the whole recipe, and I was just really put off by that. But I'm finding kind of just on my journey in life that I need a balance of structure and a little like wiggle room.
After noticing the bread she was eating had more preservatives than flavor, she decided to give baking a chance. Her company, Dope Creations, is equal parts hip-hop, freshness, and love.
I don't really have like a bread journey. Like I don't have a founder story. Yeah. Like this found me. I did the best with what I had here. And I was interested in using local food. I was interested in family. And I was interested in small business.
You start out right, you end up right, as Michelle says frequently, and of course, good bread starts with good grain. Luke Peterson runs A-Frame Farm, a certified organic farm in Madison. Wanting to address climate change and also keep wealth in local communities, Luke started reaching out to local grain buyers about 5-6 years ago. Michelle is a regular customer, and Luke thinks that her business model is
what I think everybody wished the world would be like. I think it was like that at one time. I think we can get back to it, and I think we have to get back to it. If you look at the way we buy and sell things right now, it doesn't necessarily consist of the buyer and the seller looking each other in the eye and making a deal, which brings us back to the transparency part where we both know what we're getting when we work with each other. Of the grain that I sell to Michelle, like I keep saying it's fresh, but I feel like that's really important considering like the different techniques that are used for storing grain, or where the grain comes from, or how far has it traveled, and how long has it been since it's been harvested. Michelle is probably one of the most unique customers that I have, just because of how conscious she is about where she sources her grain from, the varieties that she sources, and the freshness that goes along with each loaf that she makes. So she will, come right to the farm and pick up a bag of wheat berries.
All right, so this is how I start the process. These are wheat berries. This is a hard red winter wheat from A-Frame Farm. It's called Redeemer. We're standing in the field where this grain was grown, so that's exciting.
To maintain maximum freshness, she mills her own flour.
So I just start the machine and I have it on fine. I pour in the grains. Also, it sounds a little different with the different grains that you grind. So like I said, this is like a hard winter wheat. So it's like the machine's working a little bit harder to mill it. I also have like a soft white wheat, and it goes through a little more smoothly in the mill. So I feel like that's kind of interesting. It adds to the sound of making your bread.
Michelle poured a couple different grains through her Nutrimill, and to the untrained ear, mine, they sounded very similar. But maybe you can tell a difference. So that was the hard red winter wheat. Next, feast your ears on a soft white wheat.
Does that sound a little softer to you? All right.
Next, she makes her dope dough.
So I'm gonna start with my starter. I put a rubber band on here to make sure that it's risen. I fed this starter sometime this morning, and this is how much it's grown.
Michelle prefers to start with her starter to avoid waste.
The starter's been going for years. For when I first started it, you just keep feeding it and it grows. It sounds kind of gross for food, but that's what it is.
She does the float test.
So if you pour your starter into water and it floats on top, it's living the dream.
Next, she adds her milled wheat. For this batch, Michelle uses a combo of Redeemer wheat from A-Frame Farm and hard red winter wheat from Askegard Organic Farm in Moorhead. For this batch, she adds some bread flour so we'll really be able to see the slap and fold process later.
And for this, you're not trying to whip it, you're just trying to pull it together and incorporate the wet into the dry ingredients. That's another reason why I like this dough whisk. I feel like if I came in here with my hand, it would kind of like smush things, and you don't want to start building gluten strands now. This is just to incorporate everything while it's on what's called auto lease. So with each stage of manipulating your flour, you want to let it rest so that it can kind of adjust to what you just did to it. You know, it's kind of like Simon says do this, Simon says do that, and then you kind of get discombobulated, right? That's how you lose the game. But if you're able to rest, it's easier to follow directions. I've never said that before. It's kind of cool.
So this first stage is done. The dough then sits inside of a proofer for 30 minutes. Michelle describes a proofer as a heat box.
The starter thrives on having like a warm environment. So through each stage, I like to just keep it in a proofer so that it doesn't have to slow down and speed up again. If you keep it at constant temperature, then you know that it's constantly thriving.
After 30 minutes, salt, more water, and back to the proofer. Next, it's the most action-packed part of bread making, aside from the actual eating of the bread, the slap and fold process. Michelle's method is to turn on some hip hop, remove any and all jewelry, get into the slap and fold position, so wide stance, elbows out, and work the dough. She uses the dough's weight to help it knead itself. This process works out some of the stickiness, develops gluten strands, and incorporates air.
I think this is fun. Sometimes I do it harder if I'm mad, but
After the initial slapping, she'll let it sit, let it rest, then 2 more rounds of a slightly gentler stretching and folding, and it'll sit in the proofer for several hours to rise.
And I like to use a bigger container to like let it live, like spread your roots, like let it go. I have some smaller ones that I'll make like one little thing. Also, you see the size of this? So when I make my neighbor loaves, like, So I have to have like a smaller one too so that I can fit multiple ones in there. Otherwise it would take me days. Well, it takes me days already, but more days.
So while the bread is resting, let's talk about neighbor loaves. Michelle briefly mentioned it.
I'm part of the AGC, which is the Artisan Grain Collaborative, and they provide a program called Neighbor Loaves, in which artisan bread makers, whether they're cottage bread makers like myself who bake from home, or larger bakeries, donate to their local food shelf or place in need in their community.
People can sponsor these bakes, pay bakers to bake bread that they donate. Michelle says that she feels she can provide at least a dozen loaves, whether she's sponsored or not. Ray Martin arrives early every Wednesday morning to prep the shelves.
And here comes my bread lady, brings me 12 loaves of bread, homemade sourdough bread.
I feel like this grain is important enough that people need to know. It's healthier than some of the other products that we have on the shelf, but it makes me feel good and I know that it's needed.
The Granite Falls Food Shelf is open from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. on Wednesday and serves Yellow Medicine and Chippewa counties. But before the bread gets to the point of eating or donating, it has to be baked. The baking stage has 2 rounds. The first is 45 to 60 minutes of covered baking and looks a little like...
Boom! So you see like it's got some oven spring, but it doesn't have a lot of color yet. So you take the lid off and let it brown a little bit more. And you can see where I scored it. I feel like that's kind of just my trademark design now, not on purpose. It looks like a cactus a little bit. So we'll just push that back in the oven.
After another 45 to 60 minutes, the bread is done. Michelle is also part of Bakers Against Racism. She said that over the past year, especially with the heightened awareness around police brutality towards people of color, she's felt the need to bake for a bigger cause.
I was holding a lot of negativity and negative energy, and just like kind of what can I do and what can I do from here? So I just started finding fulfillment in my heart by giving back to my community, knowing my neighbors. I identify with dough and I identify with bread. I think that, you know, it's like me, it takes time, it's temperamental, and it's misunderstood. But once you digest it, you realize the awesome benefits that it has to offer. And I think that that's me here. Like, as people get to know me, I think I'm kind of cool. Like, hang out with me.